we have already answered quite a bit on this next question about the challenges of translatability of psychological knowledge across different contexts and traditions. So I think we've covered a lot of that. The question is, do you each want to say a bit more on that topic concerning your own specific current work, if that's relevant at all? I think maybe that would be interesting to hear. An example of what you're currently doing and how that might feature or be addressed there.
Yeah, well, I can say something quite quickly, I think. I mean, in relation to that question, I'd say the tensions around the challenges around the translatability of psychological knowledge in different contexts and traditions. I think that's, you know, our conversation already has illustrated how those translations and the challenges are a resource, not a problem. They're indicative and very helpful, important ways of what those limits are and what else we need to think about. And, you know, in terms of my own personal trajectory, you know, I kind of feel like I landed in, you know, I started up, I don't know where I'm ending, in psychology, and have moved into women's studies and gender studies for a while, along with psychology, and maybe kind of some of the time around childhood studies and sometimes around institutionally located in education, and they, I mean, especially around concepts of childhood, and Sarah might want to say more about this, but I do think that, you know, that's a place where, you know, implicit ideas from psychology and about psychology get mobilized as Ilana was saying, as sort of naturalized truths in a way that becomes very, very important to draw attention to and contest. And in that sense, you know, I think it's one of the things we've often said, isn't it, that our role as feminist and critical psychologists is to draw attention to those implicit forms of psychology that are operating as part of the practice of power in various ways. And I think that remains, you know, as part of that critical reflexive project that Ilana was drawing attention to, is a kind of an enduring, necessary role that I see us as having to play, really. And I mean, you know, Johanna, your work was very much doing that too.
Well, just some examples. I think it comes, anyway, we were talking earlier about it, but I think the issues on translation, they are crucial in both ways, from this cultural, inverted commas, translation to the written translations, that there are lots of critical work thinking on how specific texts are translated into different languages and produce different, anyway, theories and impact. But also on these cultural translations, I think this is very interesting, again, not only to think about how theory from abroad or theories from elsewhere are understood, taken, and worked within local contexts, but how, if we think about the production of the other, on how we look at some people in a marginalized way, in an exoticized way, anyway, for example, how can we, I think that this question of translation comes to the fore, comes to the surface, because this will give the perspective or the methodological perspective to look and to talk to the other. So I was thinking about some, anyway, probably all the research I've done was always looking at groups that are usually not considered in research or in treatment or in the practice of psychology, such as women and drug use, that Erica Burman was my supervisor, or the work with travestis, that are transsexual women in Brazil, older transsexual women in Brazil, or all my work with immigration and gender, also at the discourse unit with Erica Burman, Ian Parker, Khadija Chandler. So I can see how groups of a sudden they occupy a specific discursive place, and the way that psychology looks at them, it's crucial for us to think about. The other example I thought, so first on the importance of this constant reflexivity and how the work of feminist research, post-colonial, decolonial approaches, discourse analysis help us and allow us to look at this relationship between psychology and the other. Another example on translation, it's one work that we've been doing here. We are looking at how psychoanalytic theory and practice, for example, in Brazil, well, no, psychoanalytic theory, not Brazilian necessarily, but anyway, psychoanalytic theory and practice operates regarding the social categories of gender, race, sexuality, and class. And here we can look at this process of translation, but not only regarding language, but also how these aspects appear in the theory, and we can see how it impacts into the practice, because there is it informs the practice, and we can see many examples coming from this that it's very interesting, because these are like everyday issues, everyday relationships that they don't appear as an issue, although they might be.
My current work is looking at how young people reflect on and think about the transition from colonization to decolonization, and in the South African case, apartheid to democracy. And we're looking across a number of countries in Southern Africa to try and see now that some time has passed, and we're looking at a generation born after the end of colonization, how they engage with those, with the memorials and with the memories and the practices around political transition. So that's where the work is going now. And I think all of those ideas around critical reflexive work are exactly what inform those kinds of projects.